As Donald Trump likely faces yet another indictment, the weak and spineless Ron DeSantis continues to cover for him in the media. Intrigued? Then click that like, subscribe, and the alert bell, and maybe check out my Patreon and enjoy the video. It's no secret that the modern-day Republican Party, commensurate with its role as an authoritarian cult of personality surrounding Donald Trump, is a group of invertebrates. There's no spine to be found within the Republican Party, and that also includes people who are running against Donald Trump for the 2024 Republican nomination, like Ron DeSantis. Once upon a time, Ron DeSantis was competitive with Donald Trump in the polling. As a matter of fact, some polling had him ahead of Donald Trump. But for all of his savvy as a politician, Ron DeSantis is uncharismatic, and he is not a fighter. He has no spine whatsoever. Chris Christie is the only Republican in the field who will go after Donald Trump because he recognizes, whether he will make the nomination or not, that Donald Trump is an obstacle between himself and the Republican nomination. Ron DeSantis is still trying to have a foot in both worlds. He's Schrodinger's rival to Donald Trump. He's sometimes a rival and he's sometimes not. Just depends on whatever the situation demands. And there's no indication that he's being rewarded for it whatsoever. So DeSantis sat down for an interview with CNN's Jake Tapper, which is proof enough that DeSantis's campaign is struggling, because he used to swear off CNN and ABC and other mainstream media outlets, but now he's so desperate to revitalize his campaign that he'll sit down in front of anybody. But in that interview, and in a subsequent interview, I think on Newsmax, DeSantis continues to cover for Trump, even as Trump likely faces a second major indictment from Jack Smith. So I want to play a couple of clips, and we will unpack it together.
I don't think it serves us good to have a presidential election focused on what happened 4 years ago in January. And so
I think it'd be 3 years ago.
I want to focus on looking forward. I don't want to look back. I do not want to see him. I hope he doesn't get charged. I don't think it'll be good for the country. But at the
This is what I'm saying. I don't want him to be charged. DeSantis positions himself as a person of law and order, right? He campaigns that he is a law and order. He would be a law and order president. He's a law and order governor, and he's a member of the so-called law and order party and the party of personal accountability. But he says that Donald Trump shouldn't be charged because it would be bad for the country. Those ideas are mutually exclusive. They cannot peacefully coexist. Let's continue.
At the same time, I've got to focus on looking forward, and that's what we're going to do.
Jack Smith has prosecuted Democrats, too. I mean, he prosecuted, or at least was part of the prosecution of Senator Menendez, Senator John Edwards. Are you saying that if he finds evidence of criminality, he should not charge Donald Trump anyway?
What I'm saying is, when you're going...
And you can see the look on his face. I mean, he does not want the question because he does not want to answer because he doesn't have a spine.
Going after somebody on the other side of the political spectrum, if you're stretching statutes to try to criminalize maybe political disagreements, that is wrong. Now, look, this is all speculation, but I think we've gone down the road in this country of trying to criminalize differences in politics rather than saying, okay, you don't like somebody, then defeat them in the election rather than trying to use the justice system.
So first, before we go on to the second clip, this is just really frustrating because Jack Smith is not indicting Donald Trump for political disagreements. Jack Smith indicted Donald Trump for the willful retention of national defense information. It's not a political disagreement. It's a verifiable, valid charge. Donald Trump was not authorized to have that information. He was not entitled to that information, and he certainly wasn't authorized to show that information to civilians. And we have a recording of him doing all of these things. That's not a political disagreement. And if Donald Trump is indicted by Jack Smith for his involvement in January 6th, that would have been a situation in which a sitting president riled up a mob with verifiable lies about the election being stolen and used them to try to interrupt the peaceful transfer of power. That's also not a political disagreement. Political disagreements do not entitle you, as a sitting chief executive, to try to steal the election from the opponent who beat you in the election. That's not a political disagreement. So I want to play another clip from a subsequent interview made either the next day or 2 days after that covers the same topic.
We don't know what's going to happen with this J6 thing. I hope that there's not charges brought. But what they've been doing is they've been using the statute called obstruction of a proceeding, and they've kind of been...
That proceeding being the obstruction of the certification of Joe Biden's 2020 electoral victory, naming him the president-elect, and beginning the peaceful transfer of power. Pretty big deal.
Stretching that to fit conduct that may or may not have happened on January 6th. And I think if they do that, people are going to look at it and say, look, nobody's above the law. If Donald Trump or any big political person, gets caught robbing a bank or doing things that we know are traditional crimes that people get prosecuted for every day, that's just the way the cookie crumbles. But I think when you try to shove conduct into some of these more opaque statutes, and you're running with that, given the politicization of the Garland Justice Department.
So I'm just going to stop right there. This is what I'm talking about. So Ron DeSantis is like, hey, listen, nobody's above the law, including Donald Trump, but only he's not above laws that we understand, common laws, mundane laws, like bank robbery, something that's clear-cut, unambiguous. You rob a bank, you should be prosecuted for it. Those sort of laws, Donald Trump shouldn't be above those laws. If Donald Trump goes to rob a bank, he should definitely be prosecuted for that. But for more obscure laws, for laws that apply to fewer people, well, those are opaque, and it probably wouldn't be good for the country, and it would be really political. That's ridiculous. What a ridiculous standard. Those laws are on the books, and those are just as valid laws as laws against bank robbery. The laws that prevent Donald Trump from inciting an insurrection and from willfully retaining national defense information, those laws are just as valid as laws against murder and bank robbery and, grand theft auto and other things. But the fact of the matter is that very few people are in a position to commit those sorts of crimes, the crimes that Donald Trump is potentially being indicted for, because of their position. We have 330 million people in the United States. Very few of them would be in a position to willfully retain national defense information because very few of them would ever get that national defense information in the first place. Very few of them would be in a position to incite an insurrection, as was done on January 6th. So DeSantis' logic here doesn't pass the smell test. It's inconsistent. He's saying, listen, I believe in law and order. I'm a member of the Law and Order Party and the Personal Accountability Party, and I believe that nobody's above the law, except Donald Trump for certain laws. It's absolutely inconsistent. It's unprincipled, and it's proof enough that Ron DeSantis doesn't have the fortitude, the posture, the principle, the character to be the nation's chief executive if he's unwilling to say something like, listen, if Donald Trump committed the crime and there's evidence against him, then he should be indicted. He's entitled to the presumption of innocence. He can make his case in court and defend himself from these charges, but nobody is above the law, period, full stop. But he can't even say that. I'll also point out as an interesting thing, so Ron DeSantis was in politics at the time that Donald Trump was running for president, at the time Donald Trump was president, at the time that Donald Trump and his followers were chanting, lock her up, and suggesting that Hillary Clinton should be locked up. I wonder if we can find clips of Ron DeSantis trying to pump the brakes. Guys, wait. Hillary Clinton's a political rival. We shouldn't be in the process or in the habit of trying to prosecute our political opposition. I wonder if we have any evidence of Ron DeSantis saying stuff like that when it was a Democrat who was being targeted. Probably not.